Morning all. Well, it is the time of year and I like to take cuttings so that I can have more plants next summer. It's mid-August and so I'm gathering up equipment, compost, pots, enough, and more. And I'm going around to my friend Nick's house because she has a garden full of lovely things, which I've slightly got my eye on. And so we're going to take some cuttings, some for her, some for me, and some for the Common Good plant sale, which is happening on the second Saturday of May 2025. And sort of towards the end of the summer, it's always a good time to start thinking about plants for next year. So there are my biennial seedlings over there for next year. But I'm also going to start taking cuttings. So I'm going to take some cuttings at Nick's, take some cuttings here, and we'll have free plants for the garden here, but also for the plant sale. For more on the plant sale, have a look. There's a whole playlist about the plant sale. We did it this year and we're planning to do it again for 2025. And the idea is that all around the world, people hold small plant sales on the second Saturday of May and they raise money for their local gardening charity. And that way, even though it feels sometimes as if we're going to hell in a handcart at speed, we can do small things which have a ripple effect and make an amazing amount of good in the world. If I grow a small plant, very good for my mental health, makes me very happy. I sell it to you for a small amount of money, and then you have more for your garden, and you're happy. And then that money goes to the local gardening charity where people, in our case, it is the Balsam Centre in Wincanton, and it's called the Growing Space. And it's a place where people who don't have gardens can go and garden. People who need gardening for their mental health. People who just want to learn about gardening, learn about growing because they want to feed their families. It is a fantastic community space, outdoor community space. And there are small gardening charities all around the world which do similar work. So I'm starting today my prep for the Common Good Plant Sale 2025. And I hope you will be inspired and take some cuttings yourself, maybe find some free plants, and maybe think about holding a plant sale next May yourself. Right, better get on. And if you're new to the channel, you're very welcome. Please do subscribe, press the bell icon, and we'll tell you when we've got more clips coming up. And if any of the tips and tricks we give you along the way are useful, you can always buy me a coffee, or better still, join my club, which here on YouTube, which is where all the fun happens. Links to club membership and coffee buying are in the blurbs to all my clips. Right, on we go. So I've got my snips, labels, guaranteed to run in the winter weather, so I won't know what I've got, pens, no such thing as a really reliable label. So a lot of the time you just hope for the best. And you end up having, I label things like white clematis. Was, maybe flowers July, August. That's enough information for me. Right, compost. Fine rose watering can. All of these things are useful. I like square pots because then I can put 4 cuttings per pot. They like the corner. They do. It anthropomorphize your plants at all times. So it's the most beautiful day and I'm up at my friend Nick's house and this is her a lovely garden And it's August, so sometimes gardens look kind of completely blown in August. So we're going to look around and we're going to find some lovely things to take cuttings from. And you can use the principles that I'm using now to take cuttings from so many different plants. So look at what I do and then have a look around and see what you might like to take cuttings from. And if you can take the principles and repeat them, all is well. The thing you may notice is that we've set up some shade here, umbrella. And because if we take cuttings in bright sunshine, and it's quite warm, it's sort of 21 degrees, the leaves can flop. So it's good to have some shade where you're going to take your cuttings. So set up some shade, pre-fill a few pots with some compost. I don't add grit or drainage, some people do, but I don't. Have your labels to hand, and you also need a container with some water, because you walk around the garden and you snip bits from which you're going to take cuttings, and you can put them straight into a vase of water, bring them into the shade, and then you take your cuttings from the shade. So let's go and have a look round. Very important to have some nice coffee, and also to have peat-free compost. So I've filled up some pots, not too many, otherwise you end up not using them all. So fill up 5 or 6 pots. If you think about it, I'm going to take 4 cuttings per pot, mostly. And so 6 4s, 24. How many plants do you want at the end of the day? So I've just filled those pots up with good, free draining compost. And we filled a fine rosed watering can. So I don't want to slosh everything with a big rose. So the watering can's got very small small holes in the rose. Look. Small holes make delicate watering. And let's go and have a look around the garden and see what we can find. This was a building site you've made this garden out of.
Yeah, we bought the house about 20 years ago to do a renovation of a 250-year-old cottage, and ended up having to knock it down because it was falling down, and rebuilding it. So this was literally a building site, and my partner's quite handy. He did all the hard landscaping, and he has left me to do the planting, which is very much learn as I go and changes every year.
It's lovely, but look, we're going to particularly start off by going over to that clematis and have some of that. So this is in full flower, and what you want to do when you're taking a cutting is to find a stem that's not flowering and has no buds on it. But luckily with clematis you get this lovely bifurcation. It grows sideways out of the main stem, so all of these side shoots can be cuttings. I'm not going to take them off there because it would look ugly. I'm going to rootle around, and here we have.
You can be ruthless. I was ruthless with cutting this yesterday.
What I want is a nice, strong stem, but not flowering. So this sort of thing is really good. Can you see where it's joined up to the main stem and it's not flowering? And for this is called a heel cutting, and I'm going to tear it off. And it's come with a little bit of the stem from where it was joined on. Do you see? And that I can put straight into a pot. Let's do it, because I didn't bring a glass of water to put it in. So I am not using any rooting powder or anything. I'm just going to use a pencil. I'm going to dib a hole in the corner of my pot. I'm going to pop it straight in. And now I'm going to take off some of the leaves, because you need to leave enough for it to photosynthesize. Actually, I'm taking all of that off. You want to leave enough for it to photosynthesize, but you want the plant to put its energy into rooting. And the way you'll know it's rooting is in 6 weeks, a month, longer. you can pick them up as often as you like and look, is you look under the pot and there'll be little white roots coming out from underneath, and then you know it's rooted and you've got a plant. So we're going to put 4 in each of these pots. Some people would put gravel or grit on the top to stop the surface of the compost drying out. I'm not going to bother, but I am going to keep them in the shade, because you can imagine this is high summer, it's quite hot, things can be a bit wilty. And a little bit from your little fine rows. Whoops, not working at all. Anyway, you get the idea. Do what I say, not what I do. So if you find the leaves are quite big, you can cut them in half. So you've still got something to photosynthesize, but it won't transpire too much. It's a great way to stop them wilting. Right, 4 little clematis. So if you also have woody plants like this lovely little hydrangea, this is going to grow into a great big plant, but these make lovely cuttings. So I'm going to just take the bottom one off. I'm going to leave this, and that for next year is going to have flowers on it. But let's use this one, and I'm going to pull it off. She says. And again, it's another heel cutting. And I'm going to get that in a pot quickly. And then don't forget to label as you go, because otherwise you'll forget. Okay, if you are, so look, there's another heel cutting here of this other white hydrangea. So I'm going to keep these leaves, I'm going to snip out the top. You don't want it to put its energy into growing up. You want it to put its energy into rooting. And then I've got that little heel cutting where I've taken it off the parent plant. Just enough to photosynthesize. In it goes. So I'm going to take some penstemon cuttings from this long stem. Penstemon can be a little bit fussy in a wet winter and you can lose it suddenly. So it's always worth taking penstemon cuttings if you love it. This is garnet, it's one of my favourites. So I'm going to get 4 cuttings off this. I make 4 little holes, pull it off, heel cutting, take off all the leafy bits. Now you've got to be ruthless. And the energy where you've pulled the shoot off the side, that heel cutting really helps make roots. This is a very calm activity and you can do it all day long. It's really fun. You put on a nice podcast and you just spend the day taking cuttings.
Only slightly spoilt by the puppy in the background eating his food.
There's a whippet puppy here who's having a really nice time. Oh, really nice time. And there we are. So in here, in amongst all of this, I've got lots of I've got lots of lovely jasmine, this lovely creamy jasmine. But here, this lovely silvery leaf is a kibia, which I've always wanted. It's the chocolate smelling flower in the spring. I'm being attacked by a whippet. So I'm just going to have a few of this. I'm going to tear them off. There we are. There we go. And they're all more heel cuttings, and I'm going to just snip most of the leaves off. Quick, before they dry out. There we have a lovely little collection of plants for next year's plant sale. I will keep them in the shade because otherwise they'll wilt. I might cut up. What you do is you get more ruthless with the leaves. So I'm now looking at the wisteria I've taken, and I'm going to take off the tops. I want them to root and I don't want them to wilt. You get more ruthless, and you just need enough leaf for them to be able to photosynthesize, and then you can keep them in the shade and keep, in a month or 6 weeks, lift them up and look underneath to see if there are any roots curling out, and we'll see. So I'm home, and it's really, really hot and sunny now, so I'm going to keep these in the shade in the studio. It's cool here. I'm snipping off a little bit more leaf. I'm getting braver. It happens. You start off being kind of sensible, and then you realise that if you leave too much leaf, it's all going to wilt. So be ruthless. Take off a lot of leaf so that your cuttings put energy into putting the roots down, but they have enough leaf to photosynthesize. So I'm now much better than my terrible watering can. That was really not very efficient because it was a bit sloshy. I'm going to keep these damp with a little squirt of water. I'm going to keep doing this over the next few days. I'm not going to put them outside. I'm going to keep them in the cool, airy, just because it's a bit of a shocker if you put them in the sunshine. Keep them cool. And I'm going to take a load more cuttings, but I'm not going to do it this afternoon. It's too hot. So cutting in Nick's garden this morning was great. The water's still quite high in the plant, but I'm going to do some more. I'm going to be snipping around tomorrow morning in the cool, and I will bring them in here out of the direct sun in the cool where I will process them. So if you're going to take cuttings, have somewhere shady to do it. And once it's hot afternoon, do it tomorrow. Do it tomorrow. Okay? Right, Saturday morning, time for a little pyjama gardening. It's a thing. Very chic. You go out in your pyjamas, you wear an apron, and it's as though you're wearing your clothes. But I can't do it. If any of the neighbours arrive, you can say, I wasn't expecting anyone, it's Saturday morning. It's a way of proving it's not a working day by wearing your pyjamas to go gardening. Anyway, I am going to whip round the garden. I've got my snips. It's a lovely cool morning. The water is high in the necks of the plants, so it's a great time to take cuttings. So I'm going to nip round, get some stuff, and then I'm going to show you how there are some other ways of doing cuttings. Let's go. So it's much later the same day. My friend Michelle, luckily, reminded me that I had promised to make her a posy to take to a friend. So I quickly had to do that. And then I've got my friends Katie and her dad Michael staying. Katie has an episode on her lovely house. If you look back, the artist's garden. And then my friend Michelle dropped round to pick up the flowers. And then my friend Jess dropped in for a cup of tea. And then Granny, who lives in the tractor shed, came along to join us for coffee. And then we pricked out the foxgloves and the Canterbury bells. So now, dressed, I've left everybody having a cup of tea, and I'm going to take those cuttings. But I did cut all the material when it was still cool. So that's all in a vase. It's been sitting there all day, and now I can take the cuttings, and I'll show you what I'm doing. I love how when you prick out seedlings, they seem to double in size just while you're having lunch. So I've shown you how to take heel cuttings, and there are a couple of other ways to take cuttings, and I'm going to show you now. For example, I use a big plant. It's easy for you to see. So this is Salvia amistad, and it is a flowering stem. And what you can do is, if you're going to take cuttings, is go round and snip out the flowering stems a week or so before you plan to take the cuttings. I'm taking cuttings today because today's the day, but otherwise you might do it differently. But it's clear with this plant. The reason I'm doing it with this is because it's easy to see. Can you see the joins? You see there's there's a join. The plant has joins where the leaves stick out, and this is where you can take cuttings from. So, for example, I'm going to take a cutting from a join. Now, can you see here? You can see there's action there. That's where the leaves are coming out. So I'm going to snip just below that join. And you can imagine that that's where a lot of activity is happening, because that's where there are leaves coming out. So it's a good place to make roots. And then I'm going to snip off just above the next join. And this is going to be my cutting. As I did yesterday, I'm going to take off quite a lot of leaf so that it's not transpiring too much. Dip my pencil into my pot full of free draining Silver Grow peat-free compost, and I pop it in the corner there. And the reason I put cuttings in the corner of a pot is because when the roots begin to come out from the side of the stem, they will be forced down by the side of the pot. And that way, the roots will reach down to the most moist place, which is the bottom, and they should do really nicely, and the cutting shouldn't dry out. Does that make sense? So I'm going to do it again, and if I can see any kind of top growth, I'm taking that out. So I'm pinching out any kind of growing up. What I want is the potential plant, to put its energy into growing down. So there you go, very simple. And I'll show you another time. I'm coming closer so I can show you. So there is my join there. So I'm going to snip off just below the join. Strip off the side shoots. Snip off just above the next join. I'm pulling off the big leaves. Snip off spare foliage. Leaving enough for the plant to photosynthesize. Snip out any leading shoots. My fingers are very blunt, so I'm doing this with snips. And there's my cutting. could dip this into rooting powder, into very good quality honey, into water in which willow has been rotting over a week or so. You could, but you can also just put it into the pot. And these will root, but they'll take a little bit longer. And the reason, so then I'm coming later, further up the stem, and I'm beginning to get heel cutting on the same stem. And I'm beginning to get heel cuttings like the ones I was taking yesterday. So Tea Cake's growling because my friend Katie's here with her dog. And Tea Cake hates other dogs. But see how this cutting is sticking out? This is a potential cutting. So I'm going to just pull it. Take off spare leaves. Pinch out the middle. And pop that into the pot. And I like these square pots because it means I can get 4 per pot. Should be careful because it's very easy to take so many cuttings you don't know what to do with them all. So beware taking too much. For free plants. This is Salvia amistad, and I must remember to label. Now, on the subject of labelling, when you take cuttings, it is very important that you check whether the plant in question is under plant breeders' rights. If it is a new cultivar, relatively new cultivar, then it will possibly be protected by a thing called Plant Breeders' Rights, PBR, and the breeder should get a percentage of every sale of that plant. It's a bit like a copyright. So you shouldn't make free plants of plants which are under PBR because it's like taking the royalties away from an author. So particularly if you plan to sell plants, do check and make sure you're not propagating from plants which are still under PBR. Otherwise, have fun. So that's another kind of cutting. So you don't need an enormous amount of material. Look at this stem of rosemary. I've got all these heel cuttings to take. 1, 2, 3, 4. If they're a bit woody, like this one, it'll probably take, but I'm going to snip off quite a lot of the top, or I can snip off at a bit of fresher stem. See how it's lighter up the top? So it's greener, newer stem. So, but again, I'll snip beneath a node here where it joins up. Take off all the spare leaves. Snip out the top. So there's a little bit to photosynthesize, but not much. And that's my potential rosemary plant. But equally, if the growth is still quite green, I can just pull that off and make it a heel cutting, like the ones I was doing yesterday. But I still want to snip the top out. And if the leaves are long, snip them back. Tuck that in. And then equally, when you get to the top of your rosemary stem, again, and the side shoots are a bit short for taking cuttings, snip beneath a node. There's the node. Take off the spare. Snip out the top. Take off. You just need enough for photosynthesis, remember? And tuck that into your pot. So off one stem you can take heel cuttings and node cuttings. Exciting. Right, there's one more way I'm going to make some free plants out of this mint. Now, I lost all my apple mint in the bad weather last winter. It was very wet and my apple mint didn't like it. So what I've got are some rather floppy stems of apple mint from outside my back door. And I'm taking off the bigger leaves. I'm just going to keep a little bit. It's as though I'm doing floristry, really. I'm just taking off the floppier bits, and because I don't want it to die, I want it to root. And so I've just got some small leaves here. I'm going to pinch out the top again. I want the energy to go in to the bottom. And again, you can look for a node. You can look for a node. There's a node. Anywhere you see a join up the stem where the leaves come out, that's a node. So I'm going to snip just below one of the nodes there. And remember, that's where the activity is. So you're encouraging growth there. And I'm going to pop it in water. I'm going to leave it in water. I'm going to go and get a load more stems, but this is growing wild outside the back door, but I want it in a bed in my cutting garden because it sells well. So I need to make some more plants. So I'm just popping it in water, and I'm going to leave it in water and I'll watch it root. You can always just put a little bit of earth in the bottom. And there is a tiny bit of earth, it's difficult to see. Tiny little bit of earth in the bottom. And the plant, soon-to-be plant, will reach down for the earth. Anyway, I'm going to go and get some more. And then I've got some lovely free plants on the go. So there we have about 66 potential plants along with my seedlings. Very pleased with that. And I'm going to go and do something now just to prepare for my next round of cutting taking. Because I take cuttings really through the autumn, through the late summer and early autumn. And so it's a really good idea to sort of get your eye in and start spotting material that would make good cuttings so that you can have particularly slightly tender perennials that you might lose. Your scented pelargoniums. I'm just putting the compost on the heap. So I've got a bucket. There's my compost. And I've got some lovely salvias by the back door, and they've been flowering all summer. And so I'm going to cut them back, and we're only mid-August, and they will then put on a bit of growth, and I'll take cuttings from the growth as it comes. It's a good year for crab apples, she says as she's passing. Hello, ducks. So this lovely red salvia has been flowering since the end of May. So, and you can see it's sort of it's feeling a bit tired. So I'm going to cut it back, feed it, and then it'll give me nice material for cutting in a few weeks' time. Well, I hope you found that a useful session. You can take cuttings really up until the first frosts, and but just when you do, be prepared for them to sit and sulk all winter looking awful. So one of the reasons I start taking cuttings for the following spring, almost as early as July, I mean this year halfway through August, is that I then get plants which are big enough to overwinter comfortably, but not so big that I have to worry about them. For example, this pot of Salvia Hadspun will quietly settle in. By the time it's the winter, there'll be some growth, not much. I hope that it spends the first 6 weeks or so growing some roots, and then there'll be a little bit of top growth. If I find that the plants have got too bushy, I'll cut them back so that through the winter they are just photosynthesizing and building up good root balls. I'm unlikely to put these on until the spring now, but when I say spring, late winter, so whenever the mood takes me, probably February, these will get potted into their own pots and then they will grow on. I will keep them well spritzed in the shade until I'm confident that they're not going to flop in the sun or in the heat of a greenhouse. So they'll really stay in the shade for quite a long time, like weeks. Once the heat of the August sun has gone, so it's, you know, when it's sunny, it's really hot. So once the heat of the August sun has died down a bit and we're into September, so long as we're not getting any really hot weather, I will slowly let them have a bit of sunshine. And when it starts to cool down, they'll go into a cold greenhouse where they will spend the winter. I will not overwater. The reason people lose things in their greenhouses over winter is because they overwater often. So they have a build-up of mold. So you just want it to be damp, enough water for them to not die, but not so much they're going to rot. Remember that during the winter things are not growing, they're just sitting. And then in the spring, I will have plants to replace anything I've lost here over the winter, but also spare for the plant sale. Happy days. So I hope that this clip has inspired you to think about the plant sale, 10th of May next year. If you haven't held one before, have a look at the playlist, the plant sale playlist, and it might inspire you. You may have been inspired to try taking some cuttings. Go for it. It's really exciting. It's like germinating seed. Once you've started, it's very hard to stop. You can use a rooting powder if it's organic, or some unpasteurized honey as a dip, or some willow water. So put some stems of fresh willow into water for a week or so, and it will give you water with willow roots very comfortably in water. I could put a stem of willow in with this mint and it would really help the rooting process. I won't. Or you can just plonk your cuttings into free draining compost, peat-free compost as I have, and hopefully they'll root. Don't forget them. Anyway, lovely thing to do for a Sunday in August if you've got nothing else to do. I'm going to post this evening. It's always a bad idea to post on a Saturday evening in the middle of the summer because nobody watches. But it just seems to me it's quite a nice thing to do tomorrow if anybody's looking for an activity in the garden. So thanks very much for watching. and I'll see you very soon. Bye-bye.